For centuries, horror has used queerness as something to be feared, monsters coded as outsiders, villains made unnatural. But what happens when the queer gaze turns the horror back on itself? When the monster stops hiding and steps into the light? This film will look at how queer identity has been demonized and how queer artists have reclaimed the darkness for themselves. This is the Queerness of Horror.
Horror is a genre that has always been queer, whether overtly or subtly. It's such a common way of depicting villains is through camp and queer. If you think of any depiction of Dracula, the dress is always something that's so important, the fashion, there's that European sensibility as well.
A creature that is secluded and secretive, that only comes out at night, that gives its curse through an embrace. The idea that if a vampire embraces you, you will become like the vampire. You can see the synonym with homosexuality and bisexuality. And then, of course, in the 1980s, you have blood. The idea that queer people's blood might be poisonous. You have to keep it away from normal people. In the 1980s, the adverts around HIV all show tombstones falling, all this gothic imagery to try to scare us all to be more careful, and the end result is it links us with the vampire again. So the symbol of a blood-sucking, poisonous, dangerous, well-dressed, sexy creature becomes very, very queer-coded.
Queerness became shorthand for danger, something to be feared, something unnatural. But queer artists saw these tropes and took them in a new direction, such as artist and author Valentine Penrose.
Valentine Penrose's The Bloody Countess was published in 1962. Even though not many people have heard of this book, it actually had a massive impact on pop culture, and it's been a massive influence on Countess Dracula, which came out in 1971, which was a Hammer horror film. The Bloody Countess is based on the life of a Hungarian noblewoman who was believed to have been one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Throughout Penrose's novel, she aligned the Countess with something dark and unnatural. Throughout the novel, she talks about the Countess's lesbianism, but only in the context of the violence that she's committing. And I think what Penrose wanted to do was to turn those fears on their head, that if you gave women too much power, what could she do with it? Especially because this is a time when the women's liberation movement was gaining traction. This woman is a rich countess and the power's gone to her head. She's so sexually emancipated that she's killing people and bathing in their blood. And it almost mocks society's fear of the emancipated woman.
Artists like Aubrey Beardsley didn't just create eerie images, they conjured a kind of sensual horror, provocative, decadent, and unapologetically queer. Oscar Wilde commissioned Beardsley to illustrate his play Salome. The images he produced are both erotic and uncanny.
Beardsley is able to blur the line between horror and sensuality and the decadent through his use of the figurative, through the blend of elongated figures, through proportion, through the use of expression, and his explicit use of light and dark as well. In terms of the boldness of Beardsley's work, it's visible in something like the recent Interview with the Vampire TV show. There's a really brilliant scene where Lestat and Louis are hosting the Mardi Gras ball. The costuming is really evocative. They begin to dance, they embrace, their bodies are melding together, and the scene kind of culminates in them kissing in front of the partygoers, the shocked partygoers. If you were to kind of pause the scene every so often as it went along, it would look like snapshots of his works. It really feels that way.
Contemporary queer literature uses horror to show that the real monster is societal prejudice, not queer people.
There's a lot of queer horror and trans horror right now that is told from and aimed at a queer and trans audience that maybe wouldn't hit in the same way as like a cis person reading the same book, challenging what the reader is supposed to find frightening. Because it was like, for example, a white straight writer writing for a white straight audience. A thing that you're supposed to find scary is like the Dracula, AKA the foreigner. what you, a Disney child, are supposed to find frightening is the scary octopus lady, aka the queer. Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin, a gendered apocalypse story. The main characters are two trans women, so they have to basically maintain access to estrogen in the apocalypse. If your levels dip to a certain threshold, you will become a monster. The thing that Gretchen really does fearlessly in the book is that she kind of confronts the trans reader with their worst fear. If you look at the way the media depicts us and our community and trans women especially right now, it is classic scapegoating, really, really demonization.
Artworks like Orchardson's Voltaire mirror Hannibal's elegant menace, cool, cerebral, and steeped in psychological tension.
Like in the Orchardson painting, Hannibal is also a fan of an elaborate table setting or centerpiece. His are really evocative of 17th century Dutch still life paintings. We've got flowers in bloom, sliced fruits, there's meat, there's bones, there's all sorts going on in these really decadent centerpieces. It's this aspect of performance that I feel we can kind of see in this artwork as well. Obviously, they're telling very different stories, but the performative aspect feels like it's there. We see it in the composition of the figures. There's the interactions, the lines of sight, the two figures off to the side having their own separate conversation. There is a real moment of drama and tension happening here, and that's very true in Hannibal as well. The central point of the show is not about the kind of different murder every week. It's not about the cannibalism. It's a love story between Hannibal and Will. There's a good quote from Mads Mikkelsen, who plays Hannibal. To Hannibal, banality is a sin. I feel like that really speaks to the character because although he is monstrous, although he eats the rude, Hannibal knows who he is. And he is able to authentically be himself. And despite the fact that he is so truly monstrous, there's something really compelling about that.
Today, queer artists continue to reclaim the darkness. Horror isn't just a site of oppression, it's a space for transformation, a place where queerness can be fierce, untamed, and unafraid.
It's really interesting that drag can be both beautiful and horrifying. And I think for me, that's the really exciting space in between those two things. I love it when drag is not just about man dressing as woman. I like it when it plays more in between. You know, you've got drag kings, you've got drag performers who are non-binary, who are deciding they don't even want to look like a man or a woman, they want to look like an alien. Growing up in a queer body, even one that conforms with society, is strange, like it's awkward. You don't feel about your body or other people's bodies the way that society tells you you should. So to be able to create bodies that aren't even human and extend yourself and have scales or teeth or fangs, I think is something that really aligns with the queer experience.
Horror has long been a tool of fear, casting queerness into the shadows. But the monster, once a symbol of shame, is now a badge of power, a challenge to the norm, a declaration of existence. We can now recognise that the monster was never the villain. The monster was just misunderstood.